The 1970s were loud, disco lights, arena rock, rebellion, but underneath the guitars and glitter, something unexpected was happening. Faith was climbing the charts, not just in churches, but on mainstream radio, not just in hymnals, but in the Billboard Top 40. Some of these songs were openly spiritual. Others were misunderstood. A few sparked controversy.
Deep inside me,
but all of them carried religious themes and became global hits. Let's count down. Number 10, One Toke Over the Line, Brewer and Shipley, 1971.
One toke over the line, sweet Jesus, one toke over the line.
At first glance, this might seem like an unusual way to start a list about religious songs. Released in 1971, One Toke Over the Line reached number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became Brewer and Shipley's biggest hit. The title sparked controversy immediately. Many assumed it was a direct reference to drug culture, and in part, it was written during an era when that subject was common in folk rock circles.
Railway station, one toke over the line.
But here's where things get interesting. The phrase "one toke over the line" was described by the duo as meaning going just a little too far, stepping beyond a boundary. The chorus repeatedly mentions going home. And in interviews, the writers later explained that home wasn't necessarily a physical place. It symbolized peace, completion, even spiritual return.
As you can plainly see.
The song's gentle acoustic arrangement gave it an almost gospel-like feel. Harmonies float over simple instrumentation, creating a sense of longing rather than rebellion. And then something unexpected happened. In 1971, the song was performed on The Lawrence Welk Show, a program known for its wholesome, family-friendly image. The host introduced it as a modern spiritual song about finding your way home.
Down in a railway station, one toke over the line.
The irony. They apparently didn't realize the slang meaning in the title. The performance became legendary, a moment where a counterculture folk song was presented to Middle America as uplifting and faith-based. But beneath the controversy, the theme still holds, crossing lines, searching for grounding, wanting to return somewhere safe.
Railway station, one toke over the line.
Whether interpreted spiritually or symbolically, the song resonated widely, becoming an unlikely bridge between 1970s counterculture and traditional audiences, and that tension between the sacred and the secular defined much of the decade's music. Number 9, How Great Thou Art, Elvis Presley, 1971, live version.
When I know someone.
By the early 1970s, Elvis Presley was already a global icon, rock and roll legend, Hollywood star, Las Vegas headliner. But long before the fame, before Graceland, before the screaming crowds, Elvis grew up singing gospel music in church. And in 1971, during live performances in Las Vegas, he returned to those roots with one of the most powerful hymns ever written, How Great Thou Art.
Consider all.
Originally a 19th century Swedish hymn, the song had been translated into English decades earlier and recorded by many gospel artists. But when Elvis performed it live in 1971, something extraordinary happened. His version wasn't flashy. It wasn't theatrical. It was reverent.
Consider all.
Backed by full orchestration and gospel-style harmonies from the Imperials and the Sweet Inspirations, Elvis delivered the hymn with emotional intensity that stunned audiences. In fact, his gospel recordings earned him 3 Grammy Awards, and notably, all 3 were for gospel music, not rock and roll. The live 1971 performance became one of the defining spiritual moments of his later career. For many fans, it revealed a different side of Elvis, not the rebel, not the movie star, but a man deeply connected to faith through music. While rock music in the 70s pushed boundaries, Elvis was standing on stage singing a traditional hymn to thousands in Las Vegas. And the crowd listened. Because even in a decade defined by experimentation and cultural shifts, songs about faith still resonated worldwide.
How great
How Great Thou Art proved something important. Spiritual music didn't disappear in the 70s. It evolved, and sometimes it filled arenas.
Number 8. My Tribute, To God Be the Glory. Andraé Crouch, 1971.
For the things you've done for me.
In 1971, while rock and disco dominated the charts, a gospel song quietly began crossing boundaries. Written and recorded by Andraé Crouch, My Tribute, To God Be the Glory, didn't begin as a commercial project. It began as a simple expression of gratitude. Crouch reportedly wrote the song after reflecting on the direction of his life and career. At a time when contemporary gospel was still finding its voice, he blended traditional church structure with modern soul and pop influences. The result was revolutionary. The opening lines are humble and direct. How can I say thanks for the things you have done for me? No metaphor, no hidden meaning, just worship. And yet, the song moved far beyond church walls. It was recorded and performed internationally. It was translated into multiple languages. It became a staple in churches across America, Europe, Africa, and Asia. Andraé Crouch himself became one of the most influential figures in modern gospel, later collaborating with mainstream artists and even contributing to major film soundtracks. But in 1971, this song was simply about giving glory. Musically, it combined choir harmonies, contemporary rhythm sections, and emotionally expressive vocals, helping shape what would become modern gospel music in the decades that followed. Unlike some songs on this list that carried subtle or symbolic religious themes, My Tribute was unmistakably spiritual. And yet, it resonated globally, because sometimes sincerity travels further than spectacle. In a decade of experimentation and cultural shifts, this song proved that direct worship music could still reach a worldwide audience. Number 7. You Light Up My Life, Debbie Boone, 1977.
So many nights
In 1977, this song did something almost unheard of. You Light Up My Life spent 10 consecutive weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, setting a record at the time. It sounded like a romantic ballad, gentle, tender, intimate. Most listeners assumed it was a love song between two people, but Debbie Boone consistently explained something different. For her, the song was about faith.
adrift on the water.
Written by songwriter Joe Brooks for a film of the same name, the lyrics were intentionally broad, allowing listeners to interpret them in different ways. You give me hope. To carry on, Boone, who grew up in a musical family rooted in Christian values, publicly stated that she sang the song as an expression of devotion to God rather than a romantic partner.
Light up my life.
That interpretation resonated strongly with religious audiences, especially in an era when openly faith-centered music rarely dominated pop charts. The song went on to win the Grammy Award for Best New Artist in 1978 and became one of the defining soft rock hits of the decade. What makes it fascinating is its dual identity. To some, it's a timeless love ballad. To others, it's a worship song disguised as pop. And that flexibility is part of why it became such a global success. In the late 1970s, an era defined by disco, rebellion, and cultural shifts, a softly sung declaration of gratitude and hope quietly ruled the charts. You Light Up My Life proved that faith-based themes didn't need to sound like hymns to reach millions. Sometimes they just needed sincerity. Number 6. I Wish We'd All Been Ready, Larry Norman, 1970.
Whiskey from a paper cup. You drown your sorrows.
In 1970, while psychedelic rock and protest songs filled the airwaves, Larry Norman was doing something radically different. He was bringing Christian theology into rock music. I Wish We'd All Been Ready is often considered one of the foundational songs of contemporary Christian rock.
Take a look at what you've done to yourself. Why don't you?
Unlike subtle spiritual metaphors, this song was direct. It referenced biblical imagery about readiness, accountability, and spiritual awareness, themes rarely heard in mainstream rock at the time. There's no time to change your mind. The sun has come, and you've been left behind. The tone wasn't celebratory, it was urgent.
Put the bottle back on the shelf. Yellow.
Musically, it blended folk rock with a haunting, almost apocalyptic mood. The production was stripped down compared to arena rock of the era, but the message was bold. Larry Norman was one of the first artists to openly challenge the idea that rock music and faith couldn't coexist. His 1969 album, Upon This Rock, is widely regarded as one of the earliest Christian rock albums.
Why don't you look into Jesus?
I Wish We'd All Been Ready later gained wider recognition when it was featured in religious films and covered by other artists throughout the 1970s and beyond. Though it didn't dominate the Billboard Hot 100 like others on this list, its influence was enormous. It helped launch an entire genre.
Why don't you look into Jesus?
At a time when spiritual music was largely confined to churches and gospel choirs, Larry Norman stepped onto a rock stage and sang about faith without compromise. And that boldness reshaped religious music for decades to come. Number 5. Oh Happy Day, the Edwin Hawkins Singers, 1969-1970.
Oh, a happy day.
Technically released in 1969, but in the 1970s, this song exploded worldwide. Oh Happy Day wasn't just a gospel hit, it became a global phenomenon. Originally recorded by the Edwin Hawkins Singers, the song reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 and sold over 7 million copies internationally. An extraordinary achievement for a traditional gospel recording. And it wasn't watered down. It wasn't disguised.
When Jesus was.
It was openly, unmistakably Christian. Based on an 18th century hymn, the song celebrates baptism and spiritual rebirth. But what made this version revolutionary was its sound. Edwin Hawkins infused traditional church choir harmonies with contemporary soul rhythm and uplifting pop production. The lead vocal by Dorothy Combs Morrison carried raw joy and conviction. This wasn't quiet worship, it was celebration. The song crossed over into mainstream radio, international charts, and even European pop audiences, something almost unheard of for gospel music at the time. In 1970, it won a Grammy Award and opened doors for gospel artists to enter the mainstream music industry in a new way. What makes Oh Happy Day so powerful is its simplicity. And in an era marked by cultural upheaval, protest movements, and rapid change, that message resonated deeply across continents. It proved something important. Religious music didn't need to hide behind metaphor to succeed. Sometimes, pure praise could top the charts. Number 4. Bridge Over Troubled Water, Simon and Garfunkel, 1970. When this song was released in January 1970, it didn't sound like a typical pop hit. It sounded like a hymn. Bridge Over Troubled Water spent 6 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, won 5 Grammy Awards including Record of the Year and Song of the Year, and became one of the best-selling singles of all time. But beneath its orchestral swell and soaring vocal lies unmistakable gospel influence.
I'm on your side.
Paul Simon wrote the song inspired by gospel music, particularly the comforting style of church hymns and the phrasing of groups like the Swan Silvertones. The opening line, "When you're weary, feeling small," echoes the language of Scripture, even though the song never explicitly quotes the Bible. The message is simple but deeply spiritual. I will lay me down. It's a promise of sacrifice, of protection, of grace. Art Garfunkel's vocal delivery transforms the lyrics into something almost sacred. The piano intro feels like a church service beginning. By the final crescendo, It's nearly a full spiritual testimony. Interestingly, the song marked the emotional peak of the duo, and also the beginning of the end. Shortly after its release, Simon and Garfunkel split, making this their final studio album together. A song about being a source of comfort, released just as the partnership itself was ending. Religious? Not overtly, but spiritually rooted? Absolutely. Bridge Over Troubled Water proved that faith-inspired themes, reassurance, redemption, compassion, could dominate mainstream charts without ever sounding preachy. And in 1970, the world needed comfort. Number 3. Morning Has Broken. Cat Stevens, 1971.
Like the first morning.
At first listen, it feels gentle, almost like a lullaby. But Morning Has Broken is actually a Christian hymn from 1931, with lyrics written by English poet Eleanor Farr-John, and set to a traditional Scottish Gaelic melody. When Cat Stevens recorded it for his 1971 album Teaser and the Firecat, he didn't change the message. He embraced it.
Sunlit from heaven.
The song climbed into the top 10 in the US and UK, becoming one of Stevens' biggest international hits. And unlike many spiritual-leaning songs of the era, this one is explicitly about God. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning.
Mine is the sunlight.
It's a direct celebration of creation, gratitude for a new day, framed as divine blessing. What makes this version unforgettable is the piano. That flowing, luminous arrangement was played by Rick Wakeman. Yes, the same Rick Wakeman who would later join the progressive rock band Yes. His piano performance gives the song its church-like atmosphere, turning a simple hymn into something transcendent. In the early 1970s, Cat Stevens was exploring spirituality deeply, a journey that would eventually lead him to convert to Islam and step away from pop music entirely in 1977. So this wasn't just a random cover. It reflected where he was spiritually at the time, searching, questioning, reflecting. Morning Has Broken became proof that a centuries-old hymn could sit comfortably on mainstream radio. No heavy drums, no electric guitars, just faith, melody, and gratitude. And millions of listeners welcomed it. Number 2. My Sweet Lord, George Harrison, 1970. When My Sweet Lord was released in late 1970, it became the first solo number 1 single by a former Beatle. It topped charts in the US, UK, and across Europe. But this wasn't just a pop hit, it was a prayer. George Harrison wrote the song as an open expression of his spiritual devotion. At the time, he had immersed himself in Hindu philosophy and the teachings of the Hare Krishna movement. The song begins simply.
My Lord.
My sweet Lord, I really want to see you. It sounds like a love song, until the chorus shifts into a chant. Hallelujah. Then seamlessly into Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. Harrison intentionally blended Christian and Hindu expressions of worship to show that the search for God transcends religious boundaries. It was bold. In 1970, mainstream radio was not filled with Sanskrit mantras.
I really want to see you.
Yet the song sold millions of copies and became one of the defining tracks of the decade. Musically, its layered vocals and gospel-style build give it the feeling of a spiritual awakening unfolding in real time. The repetition becomes meditative, almost hypnotic, inviting listeners into something deeper than a typical pop experience. My Sweet Lord proved that explicit devotion could dominate global charts.
I really want to know you.
It also marked Harrison's emergence as a spiritual voice in rock music, stepping out from the shadow of the Beatles with something personal, vulnerable, and unapologetically religious, a chart-topping single that doubled as a mantra. Number 1. Spirit in the Sky. Norman Greenbaum, 1970. It starts with one of the most recognizable guitar riffs in rock history. Fuzzy, distorted, almost psychedelic, But listen to the lyrics. When I die and they lay me to rest, I'm gonna go to the place that's the best. Spirit in the Sky climbed to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1970, went number 1 in the UK, and has sold over 2 million copies, all while openly talking about Jesus and the afterlife. He was a Jewish songwriter inspired after watching a gospel performance on television. He thought, I could write a gospel song. And in about 15 minutes, he did. The result was a rock anthem built on unmistakably Christian imagery. Gotta have a friend in Jesus. There was no metaphor, no coded message. It was direct. In an era of cultural change, political unrest, and musical experimentation, Spirit in the Sky stood out as something different, a rock hit about heaven. And unlike many songs on this list, it wasn't subtle. It was joyful, confident, and unapologetically about faith and salvation. More than 5 decades later, it still appears in movies, commercials, and radio playlists, proving that a religious message wrapped in a killer riff can truly stand the test of time.